Hey, everybody, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your lunch break. My name is Brian Heater, and I'm being joined by Jay Sullivan, the CEO of the Mozilla Foundation. I'm glad we didn't scare you away last year. Thanks for coming back.
No, I enjoyed talking to Miriam, and it's good to give you an update after a year's gone by.
So we spoke a little bit before the show about, I said generally strategy is not a thing that I'm interested in companies. I care a lot more about the products themselves, but you're one of those companies where I think strategy is one of the most fascinating things. I mean, everybody's familiar with Firefox the browser, and since CES last year, a lot more people are familiar with Firefox the OS. Why does it make sense for Mozilla to get into the mobile space?
Well, yeah, I mean, to put in a historical context, when Mozilla started, and by the way, we're a not-for-profit open source foundation, and our goal is to give users more choice and control in their online lives and to give developers freedom to build and distribute software however they want. Now, in the PC days, the web was largely kind of moribund for a while. Internet Explorer wasn't innovating, and there was no other option. So in 2004, we launched Firefox, and it was kind of an overnight sensation. So it did great things for users. It protected their privacy and security, got rid of pop-up windows, and really had an elegant user experience. And then for developers, we really evolved what the web as a platform could do. Remember the blink tag and bold fonts? Like, we took that to now we have video and audio and all these amazing things. So, but meanwhile, and now we have 500 million active users every month. Meanwhile, though, the world is clearly gone mobile. And so the question is, what kind of world are we going to live in now? And it's not the same as the PC days, but it's analogous. Instead of one dominant player, there are two. So you have, iOS and Android. And in a world where billions of people are coming online, we felt there should be an alternative to those that are more open, more friendly to the user in terms of owning their identity, owning their data, and more friendly to the developer. The idea that you can really build for the web and have it work across multiple OSs and multiple devices. So we thought there should be an alternative.
Certainly there's a difference between launching a mobile browser and launching a mobile operating system. You didn't launch a desktop operating system when there were two major desktop players. So why kind of take the blanket approach?
Cool. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we do have a browser for Android, for example. Firefox for Android, it's got 50 million downloads, the highest rated browser in Google Play. It's a great product. Cool. But to really transform the mobile landscape, we felt that just a browser is not enough. It was enough on the PC because you do almost everything you do in a browser. On mobile, you do almost everything you do, except for kind of what we call the long tail. You'll do that inside of apps. So we thought the most disruptive, boldest thing we could do to shake up mobile and bring some independence to the various kind of layers of the stack was to go all in and do an OS.
So what is it exactly that Firefox OS is bringing to the table? What is enticing developers? What is enticing handset manufacturers? Especially when I agree there's two major players, but one of them is ostensibly open source.
Well, I think what's driving it, so you talk about strategy. I think from a mobile ecosystem as a whole, if you think of the strategy of network operators and of OEMs, in any industry, being dependent on two suppliers that come with a lot of strings attached is not a good long-term position to be in. Apple has many strings, as you know, pretty much no customization by anyone else in the stack, and there are no other OEMs, obviously. Even on Android, if you look at it from an OEM perspective, Samsung is garnering basically all the profits from an OEM point of view, and other OEMs haven't been doing so well. And also, the associated terms and conditions with having an Android distribution, you have to use Google Play, you have to use Google's identity system and content and ads. They want more choice. So from an industry perspective, everybody would love to see a third alternative be viable. Now, from a developer perspective, the biggest problem developers face is fragmentation. So they have to learn, the programming languages and tools associated with the iOS app. They have to do the same for Android, and Android itself is highly fragmented, right? There's still millions of gingerbread handsets out there, so you have to really hand-tune these things for multiple handsets. With the web, you can reach a lot of users, and we have this concept of what we call responsive design, which is kind of isolating the developer somewhat from the various screen sizes and resolutions of things. So developers want to be able to easily code, right? And there's more developers who know HTML and JavaScript than any platform ever, right? So these people, they're building mobile apps even if they don't know it yet. So, and then from a user point of view, our target market is emerging markets, where there may be over 100% mobile phone penetration, but only maybe 20% smartphone penetration. Latin America is a great example. So our target customer is someone who's just getting their very first smartphone and very likely their first experience on the internet at all.
You actually tossed out some numbers earlier that kind of blew me away with regards to the adoption of this in some of those Latin American countries. It genuinely surprised me. You sold out in Uruguay, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, Uruguay is a small country, but it's an interesting test case. But so we don't really report the numbers, but what Telefonica, one of our partners, they run the Movistar network in some countries. It's called Vivo in Brazil, different brands. But over the holidays, Uruguay, as you pointed out, over 30% of Telefonica's smartphone sales were Firefox OS devices. This is a version 1 product. In Colombia and Venezuela, the numbers around 9 to 12% of smartphone sales by Telefonica, who they announced were based on Firefox OS. So the results have far exceeded my expectations for 2013. I mean, we launched with 3 network operators in 14 countries, 3 handsets, 14 countries with 4 different network operators, and users like it.
I've got to ask you though. We were all trying to get some data on our phones, but backstage, and we're in the U.S. We like to consider ourselves a developed nation. We like to consider ourselves at the forefront of a lot of these technologies, but it's still hard to get signal in lots of places across the country. How in Brazil or in any of these other Latin American countries or other developing countries around the world, is the infrastructure in place in order to support a largely web-based handset?
Yeah, I mean, it's evolving. Now, first of all, it's not really the fact that it's web-based or not. All the mobile modern smartphones, they're relying on decent connectivity. But the trick is, how do you do a good job when it's pretty spotty? And one of the things that we've done to address this with Firefox OS is really evangelize and promote some of the programming interfaces that let developers write apps that work great when they're offline. You expect your games and your music and all this stuff to work offline, and everything here does, but there's more to do in terms of developer awareness on how to code that stuff really well. But overall, there's really no difference with Firefox OS. All these devices, they need to connect at some point to get some information.
There's a line you have to walk too in terms of your involvement with the developers, and you mentioned Android, you mentioned iOS before. Obviously, Apple is a good example of a company that is taking a very direct approach in that they're vetting everything that comes across. And I'm wondering what role you see the foundation playing with regards to how it's interacting with these app developers insofar as creating a relatively uniform experience across these devices.
Yeah, our approach to that is interesting. So we provide something called the Firefox Marketplace, which is a catalog of apps that we've vetted mainly for security, privacy, malware, things like that. But what's different is we really are encouraging and promoting 2 additional concepts. One is alternative app stores. So imagine a great store that only sells games, and they have great editorial content and information and ratings about games. Someone will do that, news and information. So we expect to see multiple app stores. And the other thing, which is really a key principle in software development, in my opinion, is you should be able to build and ship software without asking permission from anybody, right?
But on the flip side, I mean, you are checking for malware. On the flip side, it's really important to make sure that people aren't installing viruses on their phones.
Cool, that's true. And we have a lot of experience with this because by default, the web doesn't trust any piece of software, right? Cool, that's why we're vigilant about security updates, and we do the same thing here. Cool, it's why all of the, what we call the APIs, the programming interfaces to access advanced things like contacts and calendar and camera, those are all pretty locked down. Cool, so if a developer says, hey, I want to access your camera, right? On Android, you get this big checklist, right? And you want to play the game, so you say yes. Give them access to my camera, my phone, my microphone, everything. The way Firefox OS does it's more incremental. At the point of need, at the point when that app needs to access your location, it'll ask you. But it'll be in a context where you probably have a good idea of why they want it at that moment. And then the user can say yes or no. So we're trying to take a much more user-informed approach to enabling access to stuff that might be really private or sensitive information.
As an operating system that grew so fast in terms of the places it's available, the number of countries around the world, the number of carriers around the world, do you guys have to work directly with each of these carriers? I mean, they're obviously different carriers within a certain country have different needs, but I can't imagine when you're spreading out to all these different places at once.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think for us, the way that Mozilla scales is different and very, very important. We're so much smaller than our competitors that, open source, first of all, as an ethos, as something we believe in is important, but it's also important practically as a way to scale. So, for example, some of the announcements that were made this week, Panasonic, for example, or Foxconn with tablets, they were able to take the open source code and start doing stuff. And then we ended up, formalizing partnerships because we want to support them and show our interest in what they're doing. But the way that we scale over time, I would like it to become lower touch. It does have to be pretty high touch in the beginning, like our relationships with Qualcomm, Deutsche Telekom, Telefonica. Those are close relationships because when you develop a product like this, you develop it with what you call your lead customers, right? You co-develop in a lot of ways, and open source is well suited for it. Over time, I see us going to a more scalable, more self-service model where different OEMs and ODMs and network operators can take the code and do stuff. I mean, when Panasonic said, hey, we want to build smart TVs with Firefox OS, we thought that was exciting. We didn't instigate it, though. It's open source, and they started that.
So they're literally, there's some people in their labs, they're literally just developing devices. They're fiddling around with the hardware and software, and then they approach you later and let you know that, oh, by the way, we're coming out with these televisions?
Yeah, I'd say once every couple of weeks I get an email, usually from China, saying, hey, I just saw some completely new form factor device running Firefox OS. And I'm like, really? Didn't know that. So yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that's awesome about open source, but also about kind of letting go. And one of the upsides to not attempting to exert so much control is you get this beautiful kind of flowering of stuff you had no idea was going to happen. Is every product that comes out of that going to be awesome? Probably not. But it's really open and kind of organic.
And obviously you choose who you get to promote in terms of, if Panasonic has a press conference, you come out on stage. But if there are legitimately bad products giving people legitimately bad user experiences, is that going to taint the perception of this operating system?
Cool. Yeah, it's a great question, and there's two levels to it. And I'm going to geek out a little bit on open source.
You're in the right place.
From an open source point of view, the way the software licenses work, anybody can take the core code that goes into something like Firefox or Firefox OS and build products on it, and the license lets them do that. Cool. Now, what we work hard to protect, though, is the Firefox brand. You don't get unfettered access to the Firefox brand. There are terms and conditions where if you say you really go out of your way to harm the privacy and security protections of a browser based on Firefox, we're not going to want you to use the Firefox brand. So we protect those marks because in a user's mind, Firefox represents that stability, security, being on my side that we're going to protect. But from an open source licensing point of view, people can build what they want.
So you were saying earlier that you want to be a little more hands-off in the future. There's some kind of hand-holding right now in terms of working with hardware manufacturers and developers. So, 2-3 years from now, we meet back on stage. What is Mozilla's role in Firefox OS if not helping to develop the user experience on an app and on a hardware level?
Cool. Oh yeah, I mean, I don't want to overstate. I want this thing to scale. Cool. I want self-service models for people to build devices in many form factors. Cool. But Mozilla as a project, there's a meritocracy that's built up around the way the project is run. That we're going to, keep driving. The Mozilla project will keep driving Firefox OS. There's no doubt about that. But we have contributors from many organizations as well as many individuals. So I would say, if you look forward a few years, you're going to see everything from smartwatches to televisions to automotive running this thing. I'm pretty sure of that. And what you're going to see is, tens of millions of devices that are running this operating system, and that really gives the world an alternative that gives users ownership and control over their apps and content, and lets developers hack freely and distribute software, as they see fit.
So we've got the LG FireWeb right here. Yeah, I got a chance to play around with it a little bit last night. It was at the PepCom event. I get the feeling that some of these devices aren't necessarily devices that the companies want in the hands of people like us who have are used to reviewing iPhones and Nexus devices and things like that. So we're obviously it's, and I don't think there's any question that if you compare this to the latest greatest phone from a major manufacturer, it probably doesn't hold up from a hardware standpoint. So I've got to ask you, is the FireWeb, and let's blank it out a little bit, is Firefox OS something that makes sense for US consumers at any point down the road?
Well, yes, at some point down the road. So our initial target market was, as I said, these geographies where people are getting their first smartphone. It has to be very inexpensive. It has to be simple. It has to be tuned to their market. So let me give you an example. For us, if we want to listen to music, we're going to either have it stored on the device, or more likely now we're going to be streaming it from an online service. Now, in countries that have spotty network connections, as you pointed out, and where data is expensive, what we found, say in Brazil, was people wanted an FM radio, not streaming, and FM radio. So this phone includes an FM radio, and the antenna is the headset, right? So they're getting FM radio. In many countries, we see different things than we see here. In Japan, for many years, and in other countries too, you're watching television on a phone. It's not streaming, it's just television. And things like multiple SIM cards, right? So what we found, these users are really value seeking. So they want to be able to swap, have multiple SIM cards, so they can get the maximum value out of every mobile network in their country, and they know which network their different friends are on. So there's a lot of a concept of how do you get a good value, how do you hack the system. Cool. So this product is not designed for someone who's had a smartphone for 7 years. Yeah.
So yeah, you told me that earlier, the FM radio thing, and I was honestly a little taken aback. I mean, I can't remember the last device I saw. I feel like maybe like 10 years ago I saw an MP3 player with an FM radio built in, and you had also said that mentioning to somebody early on, I don't know whether it was LG or another hardware manufacturer or somebody else, but suggesting to them that a smartphone have an FM radio, they couldn't really wrap their head around why it would have that and not Spotify or just streaming audio. And why, I mean, how does that work? So how does an FM radio come to a device like this? Are you talking to LG and telling them it's a good idea?
In this case, in fact, it's interesting. In this case, the resistance was more from our own developers in Silicon Valley, in a way, right? Because the idea, and it's kind of a broader point here about Silicon Valley. Like we're pretty inward focused, I think, a lot. And I know you see this every day, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So what we did was we got on the road, right? So we have very vibrant communities in all these countries that are big Mozilla fans, right? And we asked our community and our users what they wanted, and we did a lot of on-the-ground research, spending time in people's homes, seeing how they choose technology, trying to get a sense for what they really want. And this is all about what we call product market fit, right? This is the right product for certain countries, not for the US yet.
This is an instance of where it makes sense for you to really work with each individual character in each individual country.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Like, when we looked at the experience Latin America, cool. It's not completely uniform, but there were some common themes there. This idea of value seeking. So we have a really great usage tracking app, so you can see how much money and how much data you've spent on your prepay, right? So you know how much is left. Cool. So again, this idea of product market fit is critical. So that's why I think staying focused on the needs of these particular users is preferable to trying to kind of be all things to all people at the same time. So it's still like a version 1 product.
So we mentioned the Panasonic. I don't know if can we call it a partnership? Is that?
Yeah, it's not a dirty word. We can.
You guys are friendly with each other at a bare minimum. Where does the tablet version of the OS come in? Is that another instance of a company, I don't want to say behind your backs, but developing without your knowledge and then approaching you later.
Yeah, I mean, the organization that's shown the most, kind of done the most work in extending Firefox OS into tablets has been Foxconn. They built up a pretty robust capacity for building with HTML5 and JavaScript.
So they're an OEM, they're a factory, they probably make your smartphone no matter what it is.
They make many of the products that are here, and they're investing in this HTML5 technology. So they've been doing a lot, and so in particular, one of the things that we're doing jointly with them is either highly subsidizing or helping out developers who want to join the development of the OS and port, as it were, to tablets. We've focused on smartphone resolutions and form factors, but we do on Firefox OS to tablets. Cool. So again, as a way to scale our open source community, instead of hunkering down and doing it internally, we're opening it up and say, hey, who wants to help us build this? Come join.
We're sadly all out of time. Jay, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and we'll be back in a few minutes with an interview with Sony.